Every serious conversation about justice eventually runs into moments where easy answers disappear. To understand why moral choices are so difficult, philosophers often begin with extreme situations, not because they are common, but because they expose how we actually think. When lives are at stake and time is short, our instincts take over. These moments reveal values we may never question in daily life. Justice, in this sense, is not just a legal idea. It is a deeply human struggle between outcomes, intentions, and responsibility. This course, and this discussion, begins by asking a simple but uncomfortable question. When harm is unavoidable, how do we decide who must bear it? Imagine a runaway trolley speeding down a track. Ahead, 5 workers stand directly in its path. The brakes have failed. There is no time to warn them. The only possible intervention is a switch that redirects the trolley onto a side track where a single worker stands alone. Turning the wheel will save 5 lives but guarantee the death of 1. Doing nothing will result in 5 deaths. This scenario forces a decision, not between good and evil, but between 2 forms of harm. It removes comfort, delay, and neutrality. The choice is immediate and irreversible. When people are asked what they would do in this situation, most say they would turn the trolley. Their reasoning is usually practical rather than emotional. Saving more lives feels like the lesser evil. The logic is straightforward. If harm cannot be avoided, minimize it. This response reflects a common moral instinct that outcomes matter and numbers matter. 5 lives outweigh 1. It feels rational, even compassionate. Yet this reasoning already assumes something powerful, that it is morally acceptable to actively cause harm if the overall result is better. This way of thinking becomes even clearer when people compare the trolley case to real-world events. In moments of crisis, society often praises those who make tragic decisions to prevent greater loss. The moral language used afterward focuses on sacrifice, necessity, and survival. These stories reinforce the idea that choosing the lesser harm is sometimes not only acceptable, but heroic. At this stage, the moral principle seems settled. If the goal is to reduce suffering, then sacrificing one to save many appears justified. But moral clarity begins to fade when the scenario changes slightly. Instead of being the driver, imagine standing on a bridge above the track. Below, the same trolley races toward 5 workers. Next to you stands a large man. If you push him onto the track, his body will stop the trolley, saving the 5 but killing him. This time, most people refuse. The numbers have not changed. The outcome is identical, yet the moral reaction is completely different. This hesitation reveals something important. Many people feel that physically pushing someone to their death crosses a moral line. The discomfort is not about results, but about the nature of the act itself. The man on the bridge was not already part of the danger. Involving him feels like using a person as a tool. Even those who supported sacrificing one life in the first case now feel that something is deeply wrong. The principle that once seemed obvious suddenly fractures. Attempts to explain this difference vary. Some argue that direct physical force feels more like murder than redirecting a machine. Others say intention matters, that choosing to push someone is morally heavier than allowing harm through redirection. Still others point out that being an observer rather than a participant changes responsibility. None of these explanations fully resolve the tension. Each tries to protect a moral boundary without abandoning concern for consequences. The same pattern appears in medical ethics. Consider a doctor facing 6 patients after an accident. 5 have treatable injuries. 1 is critically injured and would require all available time and resources. Saving the 1 means losing the 5. Most people agree the doctor should save the 5. Again, outcomes guide judgment. The loss of 1 life is tragic, but preventing 5 deaths feels morally necessary. Now shift the scenario. A surgeon has 5 patients who will die without organ transplants. Nearby is a healthy individual undergoing a routine checkup. Killing that person would provide the organs needed to save the 5. Almost everyone rejects this option. Despite identical numbers, the act feels monstrous. The difference lies not in the math, but in the moral meaning of intentionally killing an innocent person for parts. These examples expose a fundamental conflict in moral thinking. On one hand, we care deeply about consequences. We want to reduce suffering and save lives. On the other hand, we believe some actions are wrong no matter how beneficial the outcome. This tension is not accidental. It reflects two competing traditions in moral philosophy that continue to shape law, politics, and everyday judgment. One powerful way people try to make sense of moral dilemmas is by focusing on outcomes. This approach assumes that the moral value of an action depends entirely on what it produces. If an action leads to more happiness and less suffering overall, then it is considered the right thing to do. This way of thinking feels practical and grounded in everyday experience. After all, we constantly measure success and failure by results. Did more people benefit than suffer? Did the situation improve or worsen? In moral reasoning, this perspective suggests that intentions matter less than impact, and that numbers matter because every human experience of pain or pleasure counts equally. This idea was most clearly developed by Jeremy Bentham, an English philosopher who believed morality should be rooted in human experience rather than tradition or authority. Bentham argued that human beings are naturally driven by pleasure and pain, and that any moral or legal system that ignores this reality is disconnected from real life. According to him, the task of morality is simple in theory, though difficult in practice. Calculate which actions maximize overall happiness. In this framework, no life is inherently more valuable than another. What matters is the total balance of well-being created by a decision. Utilitarian thinking has shaped modern policy in powerful ways. Cost-benefit analysis, public health decisions, and even economic planning often rely on utilitarian logic. Governments regularly justify policies by arguing that short-term harm is acceptable if it produces long-term benefits for the majority. This approach offers a sense of fairness and neutrality. Everyone's interests are counted, and no one is privileged by status or identity. On the surface, it appears democratic and compassionate. Yet when applied to extreme cases, it reveals uncomfortable implications that many people struggle to accept. The main concern critics raise is that utilitarianism can erase moral limits. If maximizing happiness is the only goal, then almost any action can be justified under the right conditions. Innocent individuals can be sacrificed. Rights can be overridden. Personal dignity can be treated as negotiable. This is why many people instinctively resist examples like pushing a man off a bridge or harvesting organs from a healthy patient. Even if the outcome saves more lives, the act itself feels morally corrupt. Something about it violates a deeper moral boundary. This resistance points toward a different way of thinking about morality, one that focuses not on results, but on duties and rights. This approach argues that certain actions are wrong in themselves, regardless of how beneficial their consequences might be. Killing an innocent person, lying, or coercing someone are not merely bad because of what they lead to, but because of what they are. According to this view, morality places limits on what we are allowed to do, even in desperate situations. The philosopher most closely associated with this perspective is Immanuel Kant. Kant believed that moral rules are grounded in respect for human beings as rational agents. To treat someone morally is to recognize their inherent worth, not to use them as a means to achieve some further goal. From this standpoint, pushing someone to their death or killing a patient for organs is wrong because it treats a person as an object rather than an end in themselves. No amount of good outcomes can cancel that violation. What makes moral reasoning so difficult is that both perspectives capture something deeply human. We care about suffering, and we want to reduce it. At the same time, we feel that some lines should never be crossed. Real life rarely presents clean choices that satisfy both intuitions. Emergencies, scarcity, and fear force decisions where every option carries moral cost. Philosophy does not remove this tension. Instead, it brings it into focus and forces us to confront it honestly. Faced with this complexity, many people retreat into skepticism. They conclude that moral arguments never lead to final answers, so everyone should simply follow their own beliefs. But this retreat is itself a moral stance. Every day, through action or inaction, we live out answers to these questions. Laws, institutions, and personal choices all reflect moral commitments, whether we acknowledge them or not. Avoiding reflection does not eliminate responsibility, it only hides it. Engaging seriously with moral philosophy can be unsettling. It challenges traditions, habits, and comfortable assumptions. Once we begin questioning why certain actions feel right or wrong, we cannot easily return to unexamined certainty. This loss of moral innocence can feel destabilizing, even dangerous. Yet it is also what makes moral growth possible. Without questioning, there is no genuine understanding, only repetition. The aim of examining these dilemmas is not to produce easy answers or perfect moral formulas. It is to awaken moral awareness and intellectual honesty. Justice is not something we inherit fully formed. It is something we struggle toward through argument, reflection, and experience. Moral reasoning keeps the human mind restless, questioning, revising, and searching. That restlessness is not a flaw. It is the price of taking justice seriously.